Good evening. Welcome to the 2017 Lawrence Community Shelter Civic Integrity Award Talk. My name is Trey, Meyer. I'm the Executive Director of the Lawrence Community Shelter. If we could have our panelists go ahead and proceed up front and have a seat, we'll take a couple minutes to get started here. So what is the CIAT? This is something brand new. Our staff put together a special hat tip to Sharon Adams, our Director of Operations, who had seen, there you go. Seen a similar event in his hometown of Portland, Oregon, and came to us with the idea. And then a second hat tip to Mia Gonzalez, our Director of Development, who put the plan together. So the vision for the event, what we wanted to try to do tonight was have an event where we just get together and have a conversation. And we wanted to pick a subject that was relevant to what we do, kind of like a TED Talk style presentation. That's the vibe that we're after tonight. Tonight is not about positions. Tonight is about talking about issues. It's about conversation. It's about discussion. It's about problem solving. It's about learning what each piece of the ecosystem in our safety net does, understanding each of our roles in that safety net better, and maybe identifying some areas where there's some gaps and what we may be able to do as a community at our respective agencies and as our fellow citizens and fill in some of those gaps. So that's the idea here tonight. So we're going to give this a shot. This is the first time we've ever done this. We aspire to have this turn into an annual event. And so we're just going to, as we so often do and say at the shelter, we're going to put this out to the universe and have good things happen and then just keep rolling and do it again next year. So with that, let me introduce our panel members tonight. Reverend Peter Luckey of Plymouth Congregational Church, Charles Branson, Douglas County District Attorney, Sharon, Zehr, Bert, Nash Community Mental Health Center, and our awardee this evening, Mike Brouwer, who runs the reentry team over at the jail. Did you know that, by the way? Okay. Whew. Thought I might have blown the surprise. All right. Before we get going with the slideshow, I do want to acknowledge a couple of other folks that are here. First of all, our board members. I already mentioned Peter, who's on our board. John Magnuson is here. Jackie Counts, our current board president. Tanil Mian is on our board. I hope I didn't see anybody else. Shabri Perico, back there in the back. Really appreciate our board support. They are always in the foxhole with us, just giving us those attaboys and attagirls and supporting us in everything that we do, and we just really, really appreciate that. Want to have you get to know some of our staff that's here tonight. They're primarily sitting up here at the front table. I'm going to talk about some statistics here in just a moment, some results that we've been able to achieve in 2016. These are the faces of the people that are getting those results, and I want you to know them because I say this all the time. I often refer to my teammates as the special forces of social services. I really do feel that way. They're on the front lines doing the deed out there. Sharon Adams, our Director of Operations, Mia Gonzalez, our Director of Development, Jennifer Robinson, one of our case managers. Sean Noble is one of our social work interns. Logan Elder, I'm going to mention Logan. He's not with us anymore, but he was a long time, he grew up at the shelter. Logan's parents are monitors for us, and he literally grew up at LCS, just recently left us and left a big hole there. Emily William is our Director of Medical Services, and then, never mind. No, I'm just kidding. Drew, one of our former guys, former Director of Employment. Just a wonderful, wonderful team. Could I get a round of applause for our board and our teammates here? So the plan tonight, we're going to do a quick intro. I'm going to talk a little bit about our mission. We're going to open it up for panel discussion. I'd like each of the panel members just to offer some initial thoughts, and then we'll get rolling with some questions. We're going to present the award to Mike, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A for everybody at the end. Be thinking about some questions that you might have. My experience is that at these kinds of events, I always learn more from the audience than anything that they possibly could have learned from me or the speaker. So would really appreciate your questions, things that you're thinking about, just fire away. So Lawrence Community Shelter, our mission, we say it all the time. We want to put people on a path to a positive future. We are not a people warehouse. We never will be. Our goal for anybody that comes out to the shelter is to get their feet underneath them and then get right to work identifying the things that are giving them trouble and then connecting them with resources that are designed to address those issues and get them back up on their feet, living independently and sustainably on their own. That's our goal. Now, what does that mean? It can mean different things to different people. Everyone brings their own unique narrative to the shelter, but what we do tend to see is troubles in 4 or 5 broad areas: mental health, employment and education, affordable housing, physical health, disability, and then substance use disorders. Those are the common themes. But I say all the time, folks at the shelter are just like everybody in this room. They wake up in the morning and they put their feet on the ground and they have the same goals and dreams. They want the same things for their kids. They worry about the same things that we do. It just so happens that the context in which they're operating is at our facility rather than living in a home of their own. Who do we serve? I tend to kind of divide the world into 3 broad categories, if you imagine a bell curve. So at one end, in one tail of the bell curve, we have folks that are just having very temporary troubles that are able to come to us, get some supports, and get out of our facility in 2 or 3 weeks. That's one tail. In the middle, the fat part of the bell curve, folks that we refer to generally as quote-unquote houseable, folks that have many challenges, but that by working in our case management system, getting connected to resources, they're able to address those challenges and get moved out. And our goal for those folks is to get them in and out of the Lawrence Community Shelter in around 90 days. The other tail is the group of folks that I want to spend the most time talking about tonight, and that's folks that wrestle with severe and persistent mental illness and or substance use disorders. Very, very challenging demographic for us to try to get housed. Now, interestingly, 1.5 years, 2 years ago, our average length of stay was up around 180, 200 days. As we really sharpened our skills and got better and better at case management, we drove that average down to about 120, 115 days. Well, then what we saw happen, as we were getting the folks in the fat part of that bell curve housed, the folks that were left behind were the folks that are very, very difficult to house. And so paradoxically, the better we got, we hit a low with our average length of stay, and now it started climbing again. We're back up around 160 days or so. And that's going to make more sense when we talk about the challenges that we encounter. Services we provide. So the basics to start with: food, shelter, a bed, showers, laundry, just the basics. Things, frankly, that we all take for granted. But then after that, we're going to ask folks to engage in our case management process, to work on getting connected with those resources and solutions. That means if we have a mental health issue, we're going to be on the phone with Bert Nash. If we have a substance use issue, we're going to be talking to Dept and agencies like that. We have an in-house vocational rehabilitation and employment team. We've got about 200 different people jobs in 2016. We served about 499 unique individuals last year. Interestingly, we have already served 305 unique individuals this year. So I think that's a feature of the cold weather. So we have a lot of folks in our facility now. It'll be interesting to see how that compares in terms of total individuals served for the year if we hit that 500 mark. So we have the in-house employment VR team, education resources, employment resources, disability resources, whatever folks need, we connect them with those opportunities. The benefits to our community, I think that probably goes without saying. I've said to many folks, including a couple here tonight, if we could somehow capture the economic value of what Lawrence Community Shelter does in the way of taking hundreds of people in, addressing very, very difficult challenges, and putting them in a position to go back out in the community, if we could somehow monetize that or put a value on that, I think we would all be astounded by the value that we think we bring to the table as a community shelter. In 2016, we housed people for about $22 a night. A national average is somewhere around $44. So we're operating at about 50% of what other like agencies do across the United States. And you compare that to other options for sheltering people at night, and I think we're a pretty good deal. So let's get right to it now. Some folks, as I mentioned earlier, lack the capacity to care for themselves. These are folks that wrestle with severe and persistent mental illness. These are folks that may also suffer with a substance use disorder, very common for that to be co-occurring. These are the folks that we are most challenged at LCS to try to get housed. no matter what a person brings, our goal for them is to get them out and living independently and sustainably on their own, no matter what condition they may come to us in. It may take some folks a little bit more time and a little bit more work, but we're up to the job. But these are the folks that we have that are most challenging for us to try to get them housed. So I'm going to open it up to our panel at this point. And first of all, I would just like for you to offer some personal reflections on your experiences and what we're here to talk about tonight. I expect this to evolve into a larger conversation. I'm going to start with Reverend Luckey because he's doing double duty tonight and has to dip out a little bit early. So we're going to start on that end. And so, Peter, would you just share some observations?
I guess two hats I have. And one hat is being on the Lawrence Community Shelter Board, and the other hat is being pastor of a downtown church here in Lawrence, Kansas. And the more I've been in ministry, the more I have encountered with people that are down on their luck and meet them, and they worship with us, and I get to know them as folks. And the more I'm in ministry, the more I keep hearing those words of Jesus who said, "Inasmuch as you have done to the least of these, you have done to me." And I think those are words that resonate no matter what our faith is. No matter where we are on that journey, we hear those words and recognize the deep call and commitment to see the humanity in one another, wherever we are on that path. I am proud to be in a community where a number of our people in our congregation have served actually on the board of Lawrence Community Shelter, have volunteered. We're also very active with Family Promises, which is where people that are experiencing homelessness come live in our congregation and provide food. But I'm also aware, and this is the faith leader hat on me, is it's just what we do is a drop in the bucket. It's significant. We have so many people come to our door that need a gas voucher or need to get to a doctor's appointment, and the funds are drained at other resources, and folks turn to us. But what we do is just a little bit. We need each other. I visited with Matthew Falk this week, who's the homeless outreach director for the city of Lawrence, through Bert Nash. He had 423 people that he worked with this year. He gets $9,000, and you'll probably correct me if I'm wrong, from the city that goes between 423 people. And so that doesn't go very far. And so we are in partnership with Matthew to respond to people that are experiencing homelessness. All this leads me to the one thing that I'd like to leave with you, at least the more I've lived in this community, the more I see how important this is it's all about partnership. How do we in our faith communities partner with Lawrence Community Shelter? How do we partner with the city? How do we partner with the county? How do we partner with not-for-profits? And recognizing that this challenge is more than any one of us can do alone, but we got to find ways to work together. And we are, but I would just encourage more of that.
You know, I have to say from my perspective, in my job as district attorney, you know, the issue of homelessness hasn't always been at the forefront of what it is my office does or what it is that I do. But what's really brought that to the forefront for us lately has been looking at the issues developing in the community and our attempts and efforts to create our behavioral health court. And we really started looking at focusing on the other tail end that Trey was talking about, those people that have persistent mental health issues or substance abuse disorders or codependency disorders. And we really didn't realize the difficulty that we were going to face in opening our behavioral health court with those people and those issues of homelessness or near homelessness. And then the issues with trying to provide support services for those people. And I know Sharon is here, and she's been hand in hand in these things and has been walking and living this a lot longer than I have. But as we went through our very first client, and I will call them a client instead of a defendant, in our behavioral health court, because we were all invested in trying to make a successful outcome for this person, it was overwhelming to us initially how complicated it really, truly is to try to help somebody and put them on a good path, if you will. We were immediately faced with somebody that had persistent mental health issues. We were immediately faced with somebody that was codependent. And we were having to deal with, right out of the gate, housing issues, transportation issues, support issues, medication issues, a whole host of things that we don't really think about from a criminal justice standpoint. So we really had to take a look at the overall view of everything and figure out, okay, how do we work within a system that has never been designed or truly cared about dealing with these issues? We would deal with them before as kind of an after effect. Okay, you have to fix these things if you're on probation or being released. But from our standpoint, our issue is to try to decide whether or not somebody's been guilty of a crime or whether or not they're going to be punished, but not very well focused on how do we prevent them from coming back to us later on. And so it's really a kind of a fundamental sea change for a lot of people in the criminal justice system as to not only just dealing with the outcome of an act, but how do we put somebody on the path that they won't see us again in the future. And so some of those things that we were talking about, or Trey was talking about, as far as the other end of the tail of the bell curve there, those people in those codependent or substance abuse or mental health, persistent mental health issues, they're extremely difficult. The services someplace like the shelter are able to provide and other community resources are extremely important to being able to be successful for these people. And we are faced with the fact that we are not very adept to dealing with these cases, to supporting people to have positive outcomes, and we have huge gaps in services. And I'll just give you this for an example. For us to get somebody a good substance abuse evaluation, that could take weeks, if not months, to occur. Once the evaluation is had, it may take months after that before we can provide that person any services. And that creates a huge, huge pitfall and problem for us when we're trying to help that person through the system. If we have to say, you have to stay on the straight and narrow, but it's going to be 90 days plus before we can help you. So that's something that it's been a real eye-opener to me, probably not so much to Sharon, but that's an issue that I think we've really got to take a look at and really have to attempt to try to find some reasonable solutions to quickly.
Well, that's very validating that you're recognizing the difficulty that that we're having trying to serve the, over 200 severely persistently mentally ill that we have, and the 400 that you talked about, Matthew, serving. I've had kind of a unique perspective over the past several years at Bert Nash. I have been the team leader for the homeless outreach team and the team leader for the mental health team in the jail, as well as the Osawatomie State Hospital liaison. So in that position, I have had the opportunity to follow different people experiencing homelessness through different areas, the jail, Osawatomie, back to the homeless shelter, on the streets, into the mental health center, and just trying to track their path and make sure that wherever they land, they're getting the services they need. That's been quite a challenge because the number of people has not decreased. It has increased, but the services have definitely decreased. When I started out at Bert Nash, I was the liaison with Topeka State Hospital. And if somebody was admitted to Topeka State Hospital from Douglas County and they were homeless, discharging them to homelessness was not going to happen. Discharging them to a homeless shelter was not okay. I would take housing applications. We would apply for housing. I would get passes for them to come back, look for an apartment, take them back to the state hospital, and made sure that they had a safe place to be discharged to. That doesn't happen anymore. As a service provider, I've had to be more comfortable with people coming out of a state hospital, fairly stable, they're not staying as long as they used to. They're staying long enough to get on their medications, be stable, and be released to whatever place they can find, whether that be a shelter, a friend's house that they maybe can stay for a couple of days, and then they can't stay any longer. So I've had to kind of accept that. I've had to practice some radical acceptance in that this is where we are now. It's not okay. People come into the center with no place to go. If the shelter's full or for some reason that's not an option for them, we have a sleeping bag, and that's what we could do. And I have to accept that that's the best we can offer at this point. Maybe we have a tent. You know, if we're lucky enough to have a donation, we can provide a tent. And then hopefully we can continue to work with them and get them to a better place. But that's what I've kind of seen over the years with the lack of services and just what I've had to accept as okay. And it really is not okay for me to give somebody a sleeping bag and wish them luck.
Thanks, Sharon. So one thing I'll say is, as working at the jail, and you probably, well, what's the jail doing up here talking about homelessness? But one thing I want to point out is that the population that the pastor and that Sharon works with, I see a small sliver of that population. So very few people who are mentally ill are involved in the criminal justice system, and a small portion of the people who are homeless are involved in the criminal justice system. But for those that are, as Charles said, their cases are very complicated, and sorting out their lives and restarting their lives is a tall task and can be overwhelming. And so that is why, the Reentry program was created several years ago. And, I'll give you an idea of kind of our philosophy and why all of these folks and many of you sitting out here are so important to this work. Is what we have decided in Reentry is our goal is to reduce the likelihood of someone coming back to jail. We do that through assessing for what risk factors they have that may lead them to be involved in criminal activity in the future, and then we provide cognitive behavioral therapy to help reduce those risk factors. And that's what we do well. And we can't do everything well. We can't provide housing, and we can't provide employment services, and we can't provide here's how you do your checkbook and so forth. And so we rely on our partners out in the community to help provide the services that they do well. And so it becomes, in Sharon and I's world, what we call a wraparound treatment team, where we're all working together to help these very complicated cases and to each of us take a piece of that complicated pie and help that person put their life back together. Unfortunately, Charles had a tough education this year with starting the behavioral health court, but it's a fantastic education because it's really going to help us in moving forward in working with these folks. I have to say this one thing, Charles, I'm not going to make fun of you, but we heard that when you got your first case, you said, man, this is really complicated. And Sharon and I said, no, this is what they all look like. and that's the truth of it. But thank goodness that our judges, our district attorney have embraced working with this population and to trying to make it easier to have their process for reentry back into the community.
So I'll offer another observation, and then I have a brief story that I want to tell that hopefully will provide us some context for a little bit further conversation. So Sharon touched on a problem that is very vexing for us, and that is we very often will get calls from Osawatomie State Hospital, from Bert Nash, from the jail reentry team, with some version of, hey, we have a person discharging out of our facility. Can they come to you? And we get together as a team and try to analyze whether or not that person can be served well by coming to the Lawrence Community Shelter, and what can we do for that person? Now, by reputation and mission, we are an emergency homeless shelter. And not only is it our goal to get folks in and out as quickly as we can, but in some cases our funding is contingent upon that. Very often a 90-day time frame is one that is applied to measure our success. Well, the folks that are referred to us by Sharon and Mike and Osawatomie State Hospital and other similar agencies, they simply are not going to be able to be ready to move out of our shelter in 90 days. It just takes more work than that. And so we're faced with the problem of, okay, do we have a person go ahead and come to the shelter that we aren't necessarily equipped to help well because we don't provide any direct mental health services? A person that we know is going to take longer than that 90 days and really get outside the scope of our stated mission. We do it a lot, by the way. Should we do that? This is a daily, hourly, almost, conversation at LCS. And so what we have sort of had to do is we make the same public pronouncements about being an emergency homeless shelter. But in point of fact, what we actually are turning into for certain folks is a medium and long-term residential facility. And we're okay with that. This table up here is full of a bunch of people who have a heart for that mission, and we'll do it. But what I want our community to understand is we take on a large segment of folks that simply aren't going to be able to get in and out of our facility in 90 days. At public events, I'm often asked, well, how long has your longest tenured guest been at the shelter? Well, the honest answer is we've got a couple that have been there going on 2 or 3 years because they don't have any better options. And so I know my team is tired of hearing this, but management is so often about picking the right set of problems that you want to manage because there is no such thing as a problem-free scenario. And so for us, the choice becomes have the person stay with us and do everything we possibly can to broker resources for them and deal with that set of problems, or sit down with that person and say, sorry, bub, you've been here for 180 days, you have to leave because that's not consistent with our mission. Well, there's not a soul working at LCS that would pick that option. We picked the first one. And so it's all about messaging that and trying to make the community understand that we need resources. We'll do it. We will do it, and we'll do it well. But we need the support. We need the resources. So with that observation, let me tell you a quick story, and then I'd like the panel's feedback. So a person that I will call Tom, not his real name, but this is an actual case. This actually happened. This gentleman in his late 50s appeared to suffer from very severe dementia. You wouldn't necessarily know that in having a 2-minute conversation with him because he was fairly cogent. But then you walk away and come back 10 minutes later, he would not remember a single thing about who you are or any of that conversation. Was with us for going on a year. Constantly, we were trying to find options for him. Because of his dementia, one of the challenges that we faced was we could not get him to bathe or do his laundry, to the point where it became a risk not only to his health, but to the health of other guests and my teammates. So we talk and talk and talk about this and just cannot come up with any great ideas. One of the only ways we have at the end of the day to truly influence behavior is by changing a person's access that they have to our building. And so with any given policy, one of the things we can do is say, guest, if you can't or won't comport yourself consistent with this particular policy, you're not going to stay in our shelter. Now, that's obviously a last resort. It's an extreme measure, but it's one of the only things that we have. So the executive director at the shelter has the bright idea that we'll just tell this man that if he doesn't bathe and do his laundry, he's not going to be permitted to stay at the shelter, hoping that that would influence his behavior. So we pick a Saturday. We decide to convey this to him. The situation escalates fairly quickly. Lawrence police are called. They respond. They take him into custody. They're hauling him to the jail. And he punches a police officer, allegedly. And is charged with what turns out to be a level 5 felony because of his criminal history and is looking at 35 months in state prison. I didn't sleep for about 3 nights. that's really the story that caused us to get serious about thinking about this with our partners. So hearing that story, so that I left a critical piece out. So after not sleeping for about 3 days, I wrote a letter to Charles, and I said, this cannot stand. This is not what it appears. These are the issues. We have to have a further conversation about this. To Charles's credit, he said, absolutely. We caught a bit of a lucky break because the gentleman appointed to represent Tom was Hadam Shaheen, a friend of mine, who I was able to pick up the phone and call and say, hey, man, we gotta send this a different direction. We were able to get together, talk about the case, and come up with some other solutions. And we ended up, the case went a different direction than Tom going to prison, fortunately. But that case is, number one, is so representative of the challenging cases that come through all of our agencies and systems. And number two is kind of the basic case that I want to use as a model to talk about what should we have done, what could we have done differently, what are the other options, where are the gaps in the system, how can we do that better? We're very big on being a learning organization. We try not to keep making the same mistakes over and over. So when we have a situation come up like that again, what can we do better? What can we learn from that? How can we serve the next person a little bit better than Tom? So now that I've monopolized the microphone for 10 minutes, I'm going to open that up to the panel. Anybody have any particular thoughts they want to start with on that? I just need a real 30-second solution. That's all I need. So if you could just come up with that, I'd really appreciate it.
I'll just say this. The outcome for that individual ended up that they are actually placed in a care home where they're being well taken care of and their conditions being treated. And that ability to do that was actually a collaboration of with the DA's office, with Bert Nash, with the shelter, through a program designed by KU, Jason and Margaret sitting in the back there, and clinicians working inside the jail to really help make this whole process happen. The amount of phone calls, paperwork, assessments, the persistence that had to, everyone had to have, the patience the judge had to have to make this happen was absolutely, it's what we're talking about, the collaboration that makes the work go for all of us. And so I just wanted to add that piece.
Well, I just wanted to second that as an example of good collaboration with everybody involved. I think that if this person had ended up in a different jail, it would have been a different story. But because we had the services with the reentry program and the aid program with Bert Nash, we had a dedicated social worker to help this person get to where they needed to go. You know, this could have been a situation where he was released back to the street and nowhere else to go. So we are doing great work. And, you know, I just want to thank Mike for really highlighting all the work that we've been doing over the past year and bringing it out to everybody to see this and kind of putting us on the map as far as the good things we're doing. So
they all said positive stuff. And this was a very positive outcome. And I will echo the fact that it took collaboration and some thinking outside of the box. And that's one thing I'll give ourselves kudos, I guess, about we try to make sure every case has its own individual outcome suited to that case. But the reality of it is we got lucky. This case could have went a lot of different ways, and we could have had a lot of different outcomes. But because we had an opportunity to talk with each other and think outside the box and try to stretch our imaginations to try to figure out what we could do with this thing, we got an outcome that's really suitable and it's laudable, and we can sit here and talk about and say, good job. But the reality of it is this situation is a situation that can repeat itself a lot, and we are not suited the way we are currently set up and resourced to be able to handle it. So, like I said, they said really positive things, and I'm trying to say something very positive, but at the same time to say we have really got to look at how we apply our resources to these types of situations, because where we were lucky in this case, we won't be lucky in all the cases. And all those cases won't have a good outcome like this one will. So it's really important for us to look at our resources and try to stretch the ways that we work with each other and the ways that we apply our procedures to our jobs to try to come up with good solutions for these things.
Well, I'm among experts, and I'm not one of them. So just wanted to say that. I want to just add this thought, though, that we have a lot of individuals that come into our church, downtown Lawrence. As we like to say, wherever you are in life's journey, you're welcome here. Well, that's a neat thing to say, but it's a real hard thing to live. And what we're learning to say is all people are welcome, but not all behaviors are welcome. And I really applaud our partnership with the Lawrence Police Department and other folks working together with folks to say that not all behavior is welcome, and how can we be there for folks and help people, but also recognize that we need to place limits on folks' behavior.
All right, I want to leave a couple of minutes at the end for some questions and hopefully some answers. Dr. Fry, is anybody getting extra credit at that table for asking a question tonight? No, none? Okay. Okay, right on. I'd like my man Shine Adams to come up here. Shine, again, is our Director of Operations and Program Development, and he's going to introduce our awardee this evening, Mike Brouwer.
The idea of this award, as Trey said earlier, it's just beginning now. This is the first time we've done it, so we're figuring it out as we go. But the spirit of the award is it's about integrity, integration. It's what we're talking about is how things fit together and how we work together and find that integrity as a community. And we've chosen Mike Brouwer to receive the award because of his personal integrity and his support of the integrity of this network of services. I used to run a nonprofit wood shop that hired a lot of ex-offenders. A mutual friend introduced me to Mike a few years ago, and I got to know him through kind of dreaming out loud, talking on the phone, coming up with ideas about how we can best serve people who are in need of a second chance or a third chance. He taught me a few things. I'm still kind of new at this social service thing, and Mike really helped me to understand that success is best measured on a very finite level. We can't expect to wave a magic wand and put on a cape and turn somebody's life around, but we can be diligent, and we can avoid being insular and integrate these services and help somebody to get a foot in the right direction. And we need to celebrate that. Mike is a hell of a guy with a lot of vision and a great ability to think in these terms of bringing multiple services together. And the Douglas County Reentry Program has an incredible effect on the narrative of recidivism. I mean, it's lower than it's ever been because of these efforts and because of the cooperation with these other people, including myself and Trey and in our organizations. So I'd just like you all to give him a big hand of applause, and I'm going to hand him this plaque he can put on his wall in his office.
All right. Mike, congratulations. You're the inaugural recipient of the CIAT award. So hopefully someday that'll really mean something big. All right. Have we prompted any thought tonight? Have we, Jordan?
So my questions initially for Charles, but then for the whole panel. I'd like to know a little more about the behavioral health court, I think you called it, how you decide the cases should appear there, and then what happens to the folks who go through that court afterwards.
Great question. We started, more than a year ago talking about creating a behavioral health court. Margaret and Jason back there have been instrumental parts in doing it. Sharon has been a great asset and part of doing it. Judge Sally Bacorny, Autumn Shaheen is one of the defense attorneys, has been instrumental part of helping us get it created. The behavioral health court simply is a court designed to try to assist people that have been charged criminally or about to be charged criminally, that have, the initial criteria is they have to have a persistent mental health, a serious persistent mental health disorder. The serious persistent mental health disorder has to be associated with the criminal activity that brought them into our radar, I guess. They will go through an initial screening process. Somebody will refer them to us. It may be our office ourselves. Say, hey, we should look at this person for this project. It could be the city prosecutor's office. It could be the defense attorney. It could be law enforcement. Some of our referrals have come directly from law enforcement who have gone out and they've arrested this person and said, hey, this may not be somebody that needs to go to jail. But the goal is to find those people that have persistent mental health issues that are associated with their criminal conduct. We do an initial screening process that we look through and say, is this a person that meets our general criteria? From a public safety standpoint, it has to meet a certain level of conduct for us to be able to allow them to go forward that way. Once they've passed kind of our initial screen, it goes to our committee. Our committee then reviews the application. Hopefully at that point in time, we've engaged the person that's going to be the client, if you will. Through Nash, we're able to hopefully get some information about that person, what type of persistent mental health problem they have, what type of behaviors associated with them. Our group goes through and looks at the person and decides what type of services in our community can this person benefit from. Are they willing to participate? Do they have the capacity to participate? Is there something our program can do to enhance their process? If they generally meet those types of criteria, then they come into the behavioral health court. The behavioral health court system is designed to have an interaction with their kind of the team and the court system through Judge Bacorny to allow them to come in. We try to assess where they are at, which may be codependency issues, maybe housing issues. It could be medication issues. Staying consistent with their medication, all those sorts of things. Once we've kind of assessed what are some of the underlying problems, we'll try to develop a plan where they will meet with a judge initially once a week to try to monitor their progress and put them in touch with services that they need to stay in the community. If they are successful, then we pull back on some of those things as far as the contact with the court system is concerned, not with the resources. But ultimately, the goal at the end of it is if they are able to successfully navigate through the program, which could take up to a year, that at the end of it, that they won't have a conviction. It's different than a traditional diversion process where we usually set them up with some type of things that they have to complete in a certain amount of time, and then we essentially go hands off. But through this process, we help them through the process. We're aware that they're going to have fallbacks. We've actually taken a few people back into custody and released them back out again to try to set them on a different path. And at the end of it, the goal is to not have a conviction for that person that may ultimately jeopardize their housing, their support, their income, and those types of things. We recognize the fact generally that we're not going to fix people, but if we have the ability to stretch out the amount of time that it is from when we maybe see them again or for what we see them again for, then we generally count that as a success. So I hope that answered all your questions.
Great questions. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Actually, you talked about the Tom situation and it being getting lucky. And sometimes really good policy comes from having experienced luck. And so I'm curious as to whether you learned something, or is there some policy or process that can be gleaned from the Tom situation before it gets to that situation? There was obviously a solution out there for him that we were not aware of, and so I was wondering, is there some policy in there or some process that we might glean from that?
Well, for sure. One of the very relevant facts that I left out was we had for months been encouraging him to try to connect with Bert Nash or a disability professional or a psychiatrist. And when we would go to him and say, hey, what do you think about filling out a disability application? Or can we connect you with Bert Nash? Or can we make you an appointment with a psychiatrist with whom we work? His response was, Trey, I'm good. I feel great. I can't do this anymore, but when my little boys were little, I would just pick them up and put them in the car seat and take them to the doctor. And can't do that with Tom and guys like him. So for us, and I'll speak for myself, and if anybody on the team wants to offer, jump in. I learned that we need to be in touch with the mental health professionals early and often when we have folks come in that appear to be struggling with those kinds of issues. I have learned that it's going to take quite a bit more direct and intensive case management with folks like that. And by that, I mean literally, let's go get in the car, and I'm going to drive you to Bert Nash, and I'm going to walk in and do an intake with you so that they keep moving forward. We're looking at some other things right now with Bert Nash and Dept and some other folks, some grant opportunities to further improve that collaboration. But that's the things I've learned. Anybody want to jump in over here?
He's talking about adjusting our institutional approach on a case-by-case basis to serve people more thoroughly in certain cases, or customizing how much we hold hands with the person, I guess. And there's an idea floating around now we're calling the auxiliary shelter, which it's kind of it's a spot in the existing property that where we would approach people who are service resistant with different kind of protocols and how we can best serve them.
Got plans on the drawing board for that, and we're going to make a go at that in 2017. So we'll see what happens. Anybody have any other observations of what you learned from Tom's case that we haven't already talked about? It's tough. That was a hard one, for sure. All right, anybody else? Quiet table up here. Yes, sir.
So this is more for Mike, but you talked a lot about how resource intensive it is for the population, and certainly the Tom case highlighted how much more effort, both in terms of thought, but also man hours it takes to go that route versus perhaps a traditional criminal prosecution. So Mike, I guess the question is, from what you see on reentry and reduction in recidivism, from a pure community resource standpoint, how does that pay off?
I think that Tom's case is a good example of that, and that is, it took a lot of services, a lot of man hours. It was intensive. It was probably not cheap to the community in general. But now Tom is in a safe place where he's going to be taken care of. I don't see any law enforcement contact in his future, and so his coming back into the system, utilizing the homeless shelter, utilizing another community jail, that's where the payoff is. It's in the long run that in the future these people aren't using these services as intensely as they are now. And so, I have a couple of county commissioners sitting here, and it's hard to give a dollar amount to what maybe we saved. And I do know we will be saving our community money in the future by, and specifically in Tom's case, but to put a dollar amount on that is really difficult. And so I say sometimes we're saving money, and sometimes we're doing the right thing. Because the sad thing, and Tom's story may have had a happy ending, but the sad thing is a gentleman who had an organic brain disorder spent time in a cold cement cell for about a month. And that's not who we want to be as a society. And it's unfortunate. When you talk about policies, it's how do we look at working with our legislature to change how these individuals are handled. Why does it take law enforcement? This is a whole nother seminar, or discussion. But why does it take law enforcement contact to get someone like Tom help? And how do we get to a point where when the shelter first starts to have struggles with someone like Tom, that we're able to intervene in a multidisciplinary approach and to save that law enforcement contact, to save that incarceration? That's the real trick.
Sorry, just to follow up, to contrast it with the world before, what would their life, what would the life at the jail be like for a Tom, and then also for the jail staff, et cetera, to have more folks that are persistently mentally ill handled through that old process versus what Tom is doing?
Well, I'll say this. I have enough gray hair, and Sharon's quite a bit younger than me, but she might remember that, 20 years ago, someone like Tom may have been in the state hospital for a very long period of time. And believe it or not, there was a fair amount of quality of life at the state hospital back in the 1990s. And of course, those days are gone, and they're not coming back. And so what life looks like for a Tom in many communities around the state of Kansas is isolation, is a cold, dark cell, is a place where we would never choose to house someone with mental illness. And because our facilities were not designed to house people with serious symptoms and symptoms that were unmanaged. And so that's the reality of where we're at today. And even our current facility is not designed to house people who are highly symptomatic. But because of choices that this individual made, and the inability to do assessment to make a decision on whether or not he is in his right mind, we were unable to get him those kind of services until he came to the county jail, where we had staff there to connect with him daily and to bring in professionals to do clinical assessments and then to talk him into working with us on a plan. And so
Miss Mia has given me the stop sign over here, so that means we have to wrap up. So let me conclude with just a couple of things. First of all, big thank you to our panelists. Really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk about this with us. Very big thank you to the Oriad and Aaron and Nancy and Pam. Thank you so much for helping us host the event. Again, thanks to my board members. I left Heather out. I'm sorry. Totally missed that. Heather Eichhorn is also on our board. Thanks, everybody, for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Hope this has sparked some thought and some debate and given you an opportunity to think about these things further. Anytime you'd like to come out to our place, we would love to give you a tour and just show you what we do and how we do it. Biggest thank you of all to the team over here. Best group in town. Just such a pleasure to work with all of you and just really, really appreciate everything that you do on a daily basis. And thank you so much for that. So with that, thank you very much. Have a great evening.